They may be called the next generation, but they're the church of today. Reach, disciple, and mobilize students to share the hope of the gospel. This is the GenSend podcast with Shane Pruitt, Paul Worcester, and Lacey Villasenor.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the GenSend podcast. Been an incredible season, and we're going to continue those conversations on today. We're really excited about it. But again, hey, if this has been a blessing to you, give it those 5-star ratings because that really helps people find this on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Also, if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, we want to say welcome. If you primarily listen audio and you want to see these conversations, just a good reminder that we have a YouTube channel called GenSend, and you can watch these conversations through the video. Just kind of see kind of what, like the top, like 10% of whatever fits we have on. So that's about all you can see on there. But hey, we want you to check that out. Hey, if these conversations are helpful to you, share them with other people. And that would be super helpful to just invite others into this conversation if you find these to be helpful. But Paul, Lacey, what's up, friends? It's always so fun to have these conversations together.
What's up, dude? Hey, fits is a strong word when it comes to me,
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah.
I don't exactly have fits, so to speak. I have black t-shirts and trucker hats.
Oh man, same like I got a brown on today, and that's like a bright color for me because 90% of my closet is like black, gray, dark gray, or some shade thereof. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for you guys, it's mainly just they get to see the different hats you guys wear.
That's true. Yeah. I'm going with the buzz cut today. Yeah, no hat.
I had a thought just now. So this episode will come out after the Super Bowl. So what is your Super Bowl prediction?
Oh, and let's clarify that we're recording this before the Super Bowl. So
yes. Sorry, we're actually recording this before the playoffs. So we're really going in blind here. Yeah. So let's see how accurate we can be.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Shane's first. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Lacey, I can't root for your Chiefs. I can't root for the Bills because I'm a Dolphins fan. I'm going for, on the AFC, the Ravens. I think they're peaking at the right time. And on the NFC, let's see those Lions do something. It's never happened for them. I'm a big Dan Campbell fan. So I'm going to say Ravens, Lions, and then Lions win.
Wow, that's awesome. I love the Lions. I was a big Barry Sanders fan when I was a kid.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so, but no, I don't really have one. I mean, I haven't been really following it, to be honest.
Okay, here's my prediction. I'm saying Chiefs get the 3-peat. I'm saying they face the Lions, and it's a close game, just like the Chiefs have been doing all season long. Close game right up to the end, and Chiefs win. I just am actually praying for that. But I hope that is also what happens. And so we'll see. We'll find out when this releases.
We'll see. Hey, well, friends, I'm so excited about this conversation that we're having today of leveraging your post-grad years for the gospel. I think that's always a great conversation. And people are like, oh, okay, whenever I'm in student ministry, it's very clear what I'm doing, right? I'm involved in my student ministry. I'm serving, living on mission, all those things. And then when I'm in college, I'm involved with my local church college ministry. I'm involved with my on-campus ministry. And then graduation happens. Now what? And so we're going to get to talk to two people today who are living that now what. And we're so excited about it. And today we're going to have Everett and Olivia Sinclair with us. And we're excited to meet them and journey with them through their story and learn from them and celebrate what God's doing in their life. And it's exciting. They're newlyweds. That's awesome. You can still see the glow on their face. All right. Yeah. Woo. And this is super cool. They're GenSend alumni. As many of you know, GenSend is really kind of like the next gen offerings of NAM, the resources, the coaching network. And then in that is also GenSend mobilization, where we're mobilizing college students during winter breaks, spring breaks, and then especially during summer to say, use that for the glory of God. Go serve with a church plant, church planter somewhere, go serve in one of our send cities. And these are two people who did that, and it's impacted their life. And now they're living in Boston. And Olivia is actually part of the NAM family, part of the Sin Relief family, and she's serving in a Sin Relief ministry center in Boston. So that's super exciting. We just found out that that her husband is in insurance. So hey, it's always helpful to have good insurance, whatever that looks like, whatever your needs are there. So we're so excited to have these two friends with us, Olivia and Everett. So, hey, welcome to the GenSend podcast, y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
I love it. Do y'all have a Super Bowl prediction for us?
I'm picking Lions over Bills.
Oh,
okay.
That's a solid,
We got three for the Lions. I'm hoping that, because this would be their first Super Bowl. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, we're rooting for
It's
the
partially like the Lions, cheering for the Lions, but also cheering against the Chiefs. So,
Oh, yeah.
we're just saying that because Lacey's a huge Chiefs fan. We're just saying
Nice.
that. Yeah.
We're not huge Chiefs fans, so.
That's hilarious. Well, if you guys have been around GenSend at all or listened to the podcast, like Shane said, you've heard us talk about GenSend Summer, which is one of our favorite things that we get to do. So we're excited to talk to these alumni today, hear about that experience, hear about how they're leveraging their life post-grad for the gospel. So Everett, Olivia, tell us a little bit about what you guys do in Boston. I know we mentioned your jobs, so maybe tell us a little bit more about that and why you guys decided to move to the city.
Yeah. So I can start. I actually spent all 3 of my college summers doing GenSend here in Boston. And after the first one, I just fell in love with the city and knew I wanted to be here. So I came back a second summer and did GenSend again, this time at a different church. And then the third summer, I had an internship with this insurance broker that I now work for. And I did a hybrid, they called it the Faith and Work cohort, where I was doing my 40 hours a week regular internship and then helping out with Kings Hill, our church plant, on the side.
Wow.
And I got a return offer from them and spent a lot of time praying about it. And it just kind of seemed that was the way the Lord was leading, and knew I wanted to move to some city somewhere. And this made a lot of sense.
Love it.
Yeah, so I ended up doing GenSend. It was kind of my last option, actually. I wanted to go other places, but Boston was the door that the Lord opened, and I'm so thankful that he did, because that summer, it was right after my freshman year, and I just really saw what the church can be for cities and how it can be a family. So I wasn't planning on moving back to Boston, but we started dating right as he got that return offer. So he was deciding whether he was going to move, and we were just starting dating. So I was like, I'm going to date this guy and see it through, then I'll be in Boston too. And I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah. That's awesome. How did y'all meet?
We actually met on the pre-summer training for GenSend. I was our team leader, and I saw her name get added to our list and didn't know who she was. And then over the course of training in the summer, we became friends and eventually started dating.
So you got the Riz going on for sure.
Hey, there you go, Jen. Hey, that's another advertisement for GenSend. It's like, not only do you get to mobilize, for the glory of God and use your summers and breaks for the glory of God, but you may meet your future spouse, So.
Yes.
I love it. That's hilarious. Just one of the extra benefits of it. Yeah.
Yep.
So you guys were involved in college ministries and while you were attending university and stuff. How did your pastor or mentor, or maybe just the ministry in general, how'd they kind of help prepare you for the post-grad life?
You want to start this one?
Sure. I never had any specific conversations with leaders or mentors about these are tips for post-grad, or this is what you should do. But I think being part of my college ministry, it's directly out of a church. And so through college, I was just seeing more and more of the value of the local church. And so I knew that I wanted to be really invested in that post-grad as well. And also our ministry just gave us a really solid foundation in the Word and taught us through example of like how families and young adults live on mission. So I think it was mainly just through example and through the leading of our ministry that just gave me a foundation and a picture for what that could look like.
Yeah. And just to add, I'm sure we'll talk about it more as we move on, but really grew a love for the local church while we were in college and loved being a part of it, loved serving, loved being involved in the lives of families, like Olivia said, and really learned what it looks like got to see some really strong examples of marriages and families living for the glory of God, people working in ministry and people working in business and doing it to honor the Lord, and got a great picture. So once we got here, we had some examples to follow and kind of knew where to jump in, primarily be as involved as you can, as involved as possible in your local church.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, that's so encouraging to collegiate leaders and churches to make sure that we're not just siloing off the college students to be in their own little bubble. Yes, there's great places to have environments for that where students impact students, but also we want to have multi-generational discipleship going where people are building relationships and friendships across the age spectrum. And so that was part of kind of what gave you that vision, was being around young married couples, young adults living on mission after college. And so that's just something to keep in mind for our leaders, is to think about how do we not only create momentum on a college campus or reaching young adults or whatever, but also to help them get connected to the overall life of the church. So I think that's just something that comes out from your story. I think is helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree, Paul. And I think that's a good reminder for leaders, but also for those that maybe are currently in college, is that like the goal of college, university isn't just like, all right, let me grind it out for 4 years so I can get this degree. Because I think a lot of times if you approach it like that, then you get that degree and now you're like, oh no, now what? But part of that experience of college and being prepared as you are being trained for whatever your vocation is going to be, but also growing in the Lord, is also setting yourself up and planning for what you believe God's calling you to next. And it's so cool to hear Everett and Olivia kind of talk about how they were discipled, and then even being discipled by those who are living the life they're about to live, right? Post-grad. A shout out to, I'm so thankful for our Christian universities across the nation and so many of our seminaries and Bible colleges. I was just with Cedarville University not too long ago, and they have a whole program on campus called Synergy, and they're working and networking with the Sin Network, GenSend, Sin Relief, and what they're doing is they're actually helping students think through what they're going to do post-grad, not just occupation-wise, but they're saying let where you're going to go live and let it be a place of impact, and then find a job in that city, find a place to live in that city. And then they're grouping students together. So if there's like saying, hey, there's 15 students that really have a heart for Boston, they're helping group them together in kind of some D groups. And so like they're all going to move to Boston together, get jobs together, like live on mission together, serve with this particular church plant together. And those are being prepared as 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds in those college years. And I think that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and that's my story, is just like a family who mentored and discipled me and just let me see, honestly, day in and day out what it looked like to have a godly family and a godly marriage. And so I think sometimes, it's like, hey, sometimes it's great to have a specific ministry to kind of prepare seniors before they launch out into whatever. And then sometimes it's great to just like, invite them into your life and just let them see what life can be like after college, after you kind of leave that ministry and community. We've been talking a lot about that handoff in times of transition. And so that's great. I'm glad that has been y'all's story and that it's helped you guys. In that similar vein, a lot of times people, they graduate college and they leave that ministry with with a bunch of peers where they got to be together maybe like multiple times a week, and they struggle with finding a church community after college and, continuing to live on mission with a group of believers. So I know you guys mentioned the church plant that you guys are at right now. What church do you guys attend? How are y'all involved? What's it been like finding this community this first year after college?
Yeah, so we're a part of Kings Hill Church. We meet in the Back Bay neighborhood in Boston, and that's both where we spent our last summers doing GenSend. As for involvement, we started just by becoming members as soon as we could, and now we're coaches for their discipleship cohort program. So we've got groups of most of the college students in ours that we're coaching discipleship material, and then we're getting ready to start serving on Sunday mornings and just being involved in the young adults ministry and spending as much time as we can with members of our church.
I love that. What has it looked like for you guys to live on mission in your city, and what was kind of most impactful in the years prior to help you learn how to do this well?
I can start this one.
Okay.
I had some friends. Well, this is probably the most helpful thing. I had some friends who were a few years older than me, and they just absolutely committed to being a missional circle. And they would go out sharing on our college campuses, but also they would talk so much about our spheres of influence, and they would just constantly bring people into their lives that maybe knew Jesus and they wanted to walk with him even more deeply, to more deeply know God, but also those who didn't. They would just open their homes, open their doors, share so boldly. And I think through being just around them and being friends with them, that is it's just people always talk about whenever you work out, you're exercising that muscle of whatever you're doing. But then it's evangelism, just continuing to the more you share, the more natural it becomes, the more you know what questions to ask that can open up doors for spiritual conversations. And also the more that you pray for the lost that are around you, the more the Lord opens doors and you're burdened for people to know him more. So I think my friends and just people who are a few steps ahead of me just did that.
Yeah. Good. For me, all the way through college, I was wrestling with trying to decide of whether to go into ministry or into the workforce or the workplace, and was really split and went back and forth a good bit. And actually my last summer doing GenSend here, I had, as part of that work and faith cohort that I mentioned earlier, we read Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller and talked about God's view of work and different ways to leverage a secular job for the kingdom, and really just caught a vision for what that could look like and how we could use that. That got me really excited. And then I also had some conversations with different church leaders here in the city over the years that mentioned really needing just faithful men and families that are just members in the church and part of the community that aren't on staff or employed, who can help with outreach and be involved and help build trust with the lost. And all of those things were just huge for me, as well as, of course, just regular conversations with leaders in Georgia before we moved.
Yeah, that sounds really healthy. I think sometimes, we need to continue to call out the call to ministry leadership vocationally, but also we don't want to create a tier system. There's almost two extremes where at times we said, hey, calling, don't everyone's called, and kind of not clarifying what it means to be called to vocational ministry. But also we need to celebrate and champion what you're doing, Everett, that you're really laying your life down for the gospel by working your vocation, and y'all are actively participating in your church, discipling college students, involved with young adults. This is awesome, because now the church doesn't have to pay you too. So you can actually give to the church. No, it's amazing because you're an insider and you're able to reach the people that you're working with that probably a pastor would have a hard time doing. So I just love that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's an interesting dynamic within y'all's relationship, Everett and Olivia, because Olivia is working in a ministry center with Sin Relief. Everett is being a marketplace missionary. But the importance of both of those is that in both of those settings, living on mission takes intentional prayer and the ability to be able to articulate the gospel. And I think in that first step, I think a lot of times that's the question, from leaders or people themselves, like, all right, what's that first step of training others to live on mission? What's that first step for me and what that looks like in my daily life where I'm serving a ministry in a ministry center, or if I'm, in a business or in a marketplace and living on mission there? What is the first thing I can do? And we always say prayer. That sounds like a Sunday school answer, but it's not. That's the most important thing you can do, because prayer is the fuel for evangelism. Somebody once said it like this: we should never talk to people about God until we talk to God about people. And then Paul, you always share, and then I picked it up from you, and I've been sharing it like crazy. And people go, okay, I feel like prayer is one of those things we talk a lot about, but we don't really know how to do in a practical way. So Paul, share that simple evangelistic prayer that we can pray every day, but also teach others about. And it's a prayer request, praying for someone, right?
Yes. And it is, I'll admit, it's a little bit cheesy, but it'll help you remember it. And ministries across the nation are using it. Pray for Bob. Pray for a burden for the lost, an opportunity to witness, and boldness to proclaim Christ. You every morning during your quiet time, pray for burden, opportunity, and boldness. And let me just say, anyone that tries this is a dangerous prayer, right? Because you might just get what you pray for. God might break your heart. You might get open doors. And if you get an open door, that's when the third one comes in. You really need the boldness to step into those things. And then I would add, creating a list of, like what you mentioned, Olivia, is specific people's names of friends that you guys are praying for daily. That can be really helpful. Some people call it the Holy Ghost hit list, okay? You're trying to share the gospel with them. You're praying for them every day. And it's crazy. The more I pray specifically for people, the more I randomly come across them. I have guys I surf with that I try to pray for every day. And when I'm consistent, I see them in the water so much more. And our conversations go so much deeper. It's almost like God is sovereign or something like that. It's kind of crazy.
I love that.
Something else that has been cool, just as we've started a new family of two, is figuring out the ways that give us life to love our community. And we've just already fallen in love with opening our doors and having people over for meals. And it has allowed us to spend a lot of time with our neighbors who are from all over the world, who don't know Jesus, and to also love and care for church members. But it also gives us life because we love just having people in our home. And I think before getting married and moving here, I didn't necessarily know that was something that I loved so much. So finding ways to live missionally and doing things you love has been fun for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A mentor of mine said that sometimes the most strategic mission tool is your dining room table. If you can invite people over, your dining room table can be the greatest ministry tool that you can imagine. And so, actually, when Christy and I got married, we were very just wanted to spend all this time together because we were newlyweds and we were enjoying that season. But we had to make a goal to once a week do something with non-Christians. And so because we wanted to stay active, we were involved in our church and we were involved in trying to live on mission at work. But we said, hey, what if we did something fun with one non-Christian couple or some people from our apartment complex? And we invited them over for a dinner, or this is going to date me, but Nintendo Wii just came out. And we invited him over. We invited him over to play Nintendo Weed, some neighbors. And, one of the guys was smoking weed in our house. And we were like, hey, maybe go outside. It was just awkward. But we had so many great opportunities just with that one goal of once a week doing something fun with someone that's not a Christian. And that was a good habit that we kind of developed.
Paul, I think he just misunderstood the invite. It was like Nintendo Wii, and he thought Nintendo and weed. You know, I think he just misunderstood the invite.
But that is the beauty of reaching lost people. You might have to get a little messy sometimes, clarify some things. That's amazing. I think that is one of the most beautiful and exciting things about couples who are sent out together after college, or even just friend groups, kind of like what you were saying, Shane, that are sent out together. Is there's something about like having that teammate that you can invite people over with, or, open up your home together. Because I do think, especially today, as we become more and more digital, people crave that like in-person connection. And it's so rare that we have an opportunity as believers to really show some gospel hospitality and open up our tables, open up our homes to people. So I love that. Have you guys seen anything in there, or what has God done kind of, I don't think it's been a full year since you guys have moved to Boston, but maybe just in the short time span that you have been there, kind of what have you seen God do, maybe in your own lives or just even in the city?
So probably the most tangible is, like you were saying about having a goal of doing something fun with non-believers once a week. We've really been trying to be intentional with spending time with our neighbors, a lot of whom are from Mumbai, India. And a couple of them have voiced interest, and one of them has already come to church with us, and they started asking, another one wants to come soon. And so that's been probably the most tangible and one of the more exciting, I guess, wins as we've been praying and seeking the Lord here.
Yeah. So we've been married for almost 4 months. So in Boston for almost 4 months. But I think even already, this is something in my own heart. I've just seen like how weak I am. And I think moving to Boston or moving somewhere strategic in college with this idea that was like far away. And I was like, I want to do this for God. Like, I'm going to move somewhere strategic. But now we're like we did it and we're in it and we're trying to figure out like, okay, well, what does this look like to do well on a daily basis and to continue? And through that, I've just seen my own weakness and just a greater dependence on the Lord for like, okay, we're here. What does it look like? Like, we need your guidance, God, even after we've picked the city and picked jobs and picked spouse. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing honestly like that, because it's easy to glamorize this sort of thing. Like, oh, go to a really cool city like Boston, or, go on mission and do something heroic for the kingdom. But yeah, we're still human. We have it. No one said that living on mission would be easy. Actually, most of when I read the scripture, it's going to be hard. The things that Apostle Paul went through, the apostles, Jesus said, follow me, and take up your cross and follow me. And so, man, I just want to encourage you guys that I love seeing that you guys are there digging deep roots in a local church, and what you're doing to disciple students, that's going to bear eternal fruit. And so it's awesome that it's not just one or the other, that we're living on mission to reach our city, but we're also building up a church plant. You're building up a church plant, building up local churches. That's going to bear eternal fruit also. So it's a team sport. Ministry is a team sport, right? And so when a church thrives and reaches people, if we're contributing to it, if we're serving it, man, we get to kind of like celebrate in that fruit as well. And I don't know, as you're sharing, the passage that came to mind, 2 Corinthians 4:7, it says, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that his all-surpassing power comes from God and not from us. And so it's just so encouraging that, we are just servants, and we're these jars of clay, and God's power is what is going to go forward and be used. And so, I don't know, I hope that encourages someone that God is able to be with us even in the midst of our weaknesses. And that's a big piece of the missional puzzle is, man, we just step in and we're there. We just show up and God does the heavy lifting. So, man, that's so encouraging.
Amen. Yeah. If you guys could go back, maybe thinking to freshman Everett, freshman Olivia, or maybe even sophomore, I don't know. What advice would you guys give them now that you've graduated college? You've been kind of living this post-grad life for a few months. Is there anything you would encourage them to do differently, or just Just general advice.
Yeah, I can start. I've had a couple of things pop into my head just while we've been talking now. But I think for me, so much of college, I was thinking about where I didn't think I was going to stay in Georgia. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I thought so much about that big decision. And if I could go back, I would tell myself not to worry so much about the future and just being obedient in the day to day. And kind of like Olivia was just saying, like it was this big decision of like, oh, we're going to move to Boston. And that's a lot, like moving, and it's not easy, but that's just one decision compared to the many that we make every day. And it's possible to make a bigger decision like that and think that you're doing something big, but then come move somewhere and not actually accomplish anything or do anything. They're just, even from like a freshman or sophomore year in college, just really focusing on obedience to the Lord and holiness day to day and less on some hypothetical decision 3 or 4 years in the future.
That's good.
Not that you shouldn't think about the future, just to focus on the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as a freshman going into like new campus ministries and new churches, I had a very like consumer mindset of like, okay, I'm going to walk into this place. Like, how do I feel when I walk into this church? Or how do I feel like around these people? And I think something that a friend had told me that she heard in a podcast was changing your mindset from being a here I am person, rather like changing it into being a there you are person. So not coming into a room or a ministry being like, here I am, what am I going to get from, but coming into a room and being like, there you are, how can I love this other person? And I think I would have settled on a local church and on like my involvement in college a lot faster if I would have just like come into it with the perspective of like, okay, I want to be like committed somewhere, like how people here, rather than seeking love like for myself so much in those first few months of college. So yeah, I think that's probably the main thing, because I struggled through that freshman year.
Yeah. And if I can add one more thing, a little bit slightly related, but in college, it's much easier to make friends than it is in post-grad. And the pace of life slows down. And I think I spent a lot of time in college trying to figure out who I wanted my friends to be, because it seemed like there were so many people around. And I think the transition to post-grad, you don't have the frequency of contact with friends like you did in college. Like we would see our friends 4 or 5 times a week. And now it's like once a week, maybe twice. And to find that depth and to really enjoy good friendships, it's taken a lot more intentionality, and it's taken some vulnerability to step out and say, hey, we just moved here. I know we're not super close yet, but would you want to start meeting weekly or monthly? And I started meeting with a couple of guys once a month, and Olivia's meeting with a girl twice a month. And we've really had to seek that out and kind of put ourselves out there and start being vulnerable before we really have a lot of time to build depth in the relationship, just because it's a different stage of life, and being postgrad is very different from college. So temper some expectations for that, and then to have that kind of mentality of seeking and initiating with others rather than waiting for others to seek you out as a friend.
Yeah. That's so good. Shane, Paul, do you guys have any newlywed advice for them? They've been married 4 months.
Paul, yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Paul, what you got, Paul?
Yeah, I would say you guys are, I love hearing what you're about, is that you are staying outward focused. I think even in marriage, it's easy to become ingrown and kind of like in your first year and use it, say, hey, this is our first year. We got to just focus on ourselves and kind of silo yourself out. And there is a temptation to do that. And you need some of that to protect that time together where it's just you two. But it's according to what I read in scripture, is God's called us to live on mission for his glory. And so living outward focus actually will help you grow and become more and more healthy and just more kingdom-centered and God-centered and Christ-centered. And that's going to be the thing that draws you closer together as you pursue Christ, as you pursue his mission, and even make sacrifices. Like, I'm sure there's some weeks that you're hosting the big meal or whatever, you're inviting neighbors over, and it's stressful. It'd be easier just to put your pajamas on and put on a show or whatever it is. But you guys are doing that together, and you're in the trenches, so to speak, of ministry. That's when the bond and the relationship was forged. That's actually for Christy and I, my wife and I. When we decided to continue to live on mission, that's when our marriage continues to draw closer together. When we kind of got inward focused, there was actually first couple of years, we had seasons where we were more like protective of our time. And that didn't end well. We kind of like got into fights we didn't need to, or whatever, stuff like that. And so like continue to stay outward focused and serving while fighting for some time alone. But it's a really healthy thing to continue to be outward focused. So that's kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah, I love that, Paul. And yeah, I would just say approach it. I think one of the things that Casey and I have learned the most is Olivia is simply kind of like what you said. I love that. That's a great way to articulate it, is approach marriage just like that. Instead of saying, here I am, say, there you are, and it really is Matthew 16:24, where Jesus said, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. It's like, same principle, I feel like, in marriage. Like, if you want to get married, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and get married. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think if you're going in, and this is probably before y'all's time, really, Everett and Olivia and Lacey, you as well. Paul, you'll know it. Y'all might know it more. But there was this old movie called Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise in it. And the big, common, big cliche is like, you complete me. And I think if you approach marriage looking for someone to complete you, that's where you feel like you're not going into marriage. You should go into marriage already complete in Jesus, and you're really going there to serve, and there used to be this kind of evangelistic kind of initiative called I Am Second. And the idea was Jesus number one, me too. But really in marriage, it's you are third. Jesus number one, your spouse number two, and then you three. So I think if you're always putting Jesus first and putting your spouse above you, and both of you are doing that, then you don't have to fight for yourself, because Jesus is advocating for you, and so is your spouse, in doing that back and forth. And it sounds great, and it makes for a good social media post, but that's a daily grind of learning how to do that. Casey and I have been married for 20 years, and each year it gets a little bit sweeter. But our first year, when people go, oh, our first year is like an extended honeymoon, I'm like, well, God bless you, because that wasn't ours. Because it was like Casey world and Shane world in a head-on collision. You know what I mean? So those were things that the Lord is continuing to teach us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That's hilarious. Well, let me end here. We have a lot of pastors and leaders that listen to this podcast, all kinds of people that lead in different areas. So just as you guys reflect on your college experience, what is one thing you wish these pastors and leaders knew about college students, about being a college student today, and maybe even something you wish they did more of?
I can start. Our church, I think, did a great job of this, but just giving us access and exposure to families and seeing how moms and dads, husbands, wives, workers, bosses, how they love their spouses, how they shepherd their children, how they work and honor the Lord and approach secular and Christian workplaces, and just having examples that we can follow was huge. And so to be able to see that, and then also paired with that, people who know us and who can see our strengths and our weaknesses and encourage us to, God's given us all gifts, and we can use those strategically and steward them well. And so having leaders that can know us and see what we're good at and see what we're passionate about, and then help give us some direction and guidance on how to use that well for the kingdom.
That's good.
Yeah. I think I would say that as a college student getting involved in a ministry, I wanted to say yes to everything. And so quickly, I looked at my schedule and I was like, I don't have a free night to spend with people outside walls or outside of a church gathering. And so I think, although everything I was involved in with our college ministry was awesome and grew me. I think encouragement to also live and like to have margin to spend time with people who might not want to come to a church service. Just like creating margin in your life for people that's not in a church space. I think that's something that just as college students, like I just remember like wanting to say yes to everything. And even now, like as we're joining this church plant, like we're tempted to say yes to every serving opportunity and like all of those things because we love the people and we love the church and we love the mission. But also remembering like, okay, if our whole schedule is absolutely packed, then like how are we like living in the world and how are we loving it?
Right. That's good.
I love that, Olivia. And I think that's a great reminder to leaders, us as leaders, to go, hey, we got to leave space to allow people to go live on mission, because I think a lot of times we're like telling people and discipling people, go live on mission, go live on mission, go live on mission. But then we also say, hey, but come to our building every day. You know what I mean? So we got to leave that space there for people to actually go do what they're being equipped and discipled to do, to go be around spiritually lost people. So I think that's a good reminder for leaders to hear that.
Yeah. One practical hack that we did was if we had a guy, for example, that lived in the dorms and he wanted to reach, and this is in the college ministry, and he wanted to reach his friends in the dorms, instead of coming to our freshman community group or sophomore community group or whatever, we had encouraged him to start his own evangelistic Bible study in the dorm, and that counted as his small group. And so he was living on mission. And so that was one less night that he had to come to one of our meetings, but he was starting this evangelistic Bible study. And so we saw all these evangelistic Bible studies eventually turn into discipleship groups all over campus, the fraternities, the sororities, athletic teams. And if they were doing that, we're like, hey, don't come to one of our centralized community groups. Okay. So it kind of like gave him an extra night of the week. So that was kind of a practical thing that we communicated with our leaders that were trying to live on mission is no, like go do that and we'll support you. We'll help you. We'll give you tools to do that. So that's one kind of strategy. Another kind of thing I wanted to mention in this conversation, I think is really helpful for leaders to consider is forming pipelines from your local ministry to potential sending locations. And so like what your church did, where you guys went to Boston multiple times, that's a great pipeline where you can almost adopt another city or even an international location where you have, missionaries, where you can send summer teams to these missionaries overseas. And if you can send summer students to the same place every summer, you'll see this kind of trickle of people feeling called to that location. So that's just kind of a strategic kind of idea there. So, yeah.
I love that. That's some great ideas as you guys are thinking through this and listening to this podcast of kind of what to take from it. We've also started something we call the GenSend Book Club. And so we, every episode, recommend a book that has impacted us or one we're currently reading and something that it's taught us. And so if you're looking to grow your reading list this year, we're going to each share one. Everett, Olivia, you guys, if you want to share one, we'll let you guys go last so you can think of one. Or if you're reading one and want to share about it, it can even be something fun like a fiction. But Paul, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, actually it goes great with this conversation. It's called Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World by Bob McNabb. And he was part of a really thriving college ministry that was leading a bunch of people to Christ. And there were student leaders that were discipling others who were discipling others. But then when they graduated, they were like, hey, go change the world for Jesus. And a lot of these, awesome student leaders were struggling to continue to do ministry after college. And so he did like a legit research study. I think it was his doctorate of ministry. And he discovered that the number one factor for them continuing to lead people to Christ and to make disciples after college was not the amount of training, was not all this other stuff. It was being on a team. If they had a team of peers that they moved to the city together And they formed this kind of like missional community where they kept each other accountable to share the gospel, to pray, to stay hungry for those things. They were much more likely to reach non-Christians and share the gospel. So that book, Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World, is awesome. Any ministry leader has got to read it, but also we give it to our seniors as they're processing what their next step might be when after college. So we give all of them that a copy of that. So great resource.
Shane, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think this season's been super fun because like we've said multiple times, it's not just like us talking about young adults and young people. We're actually having young adults and young people on here to not just talk about them, but talk to them and like learn from them. And so one of the common questions I get a lot is like, hey, what are some great books out there on young people? And so particularly in Gen Z, I know we got the alpha generation that's coming up right behind, and then now the beta generation coming up after alpha generation. But one of my favorite books specifically on Gen Z is Meet Generation Z by James Emery White. And it's really comprehensive, and I love it. It's all about how to communicate the scriptures to Gen Z. How's Gen Z think? How are they living? What are some things they're navigating? What are some fears? What are some wins? And it's really just understanding a whole generation. I think especially if you're going to be a leader trying to reach and mobilize a generation, you approach it like a missionary. We've been talking about that. So just like if you were going to move to China to be a missionary, you would want to understand the Chinese people. So if you're going to be a missionary to Gen Z, to understand a generation. So that's just a great helpful resource called Meet Generation Z.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking of the newlyweds when I thought of my book, but I was thinking what book was so helpful for me, and just, even trying to determine, how do I navigate dating, and how do I figure out who I want to marry, all those things. And the book that I thought of it's called Loveology by John Mark Comer. And it has a few chapters on marriage and dating, but it also just is a beautiful, easy to read theology of like male and female and our roles. And so it's just it's a great book of love in the Bible, the different words that God uses throughout scripture to describe love and the different types of love. And so that is my recommendation. Everett, Olivia, do you guys have one for us?
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier, but Tim Keller's Every Good Endeavor is definitely top 3 books I've read. It goes over, I was thinking between ministry and the workplace, and it was a great, super comprehensive covering of how to honor the Lord in your work, regardless of where or for who you are working. It also broadened my perspective of the gospel to go beyond. One of his points is that the gospel affects every area, every piece of life, not just individuals and their salvation. And so it elevated me from thinking about just the gospel from saving sinners to the gospel restoring the entire world and how I could play a part in that. And that was exciting for me and gave me vision and was huge.
This probably isn't the most impactful book I've ever read, but the 9 Marks church membership book is something that before we were able to become members at Kings Hill, they had us read it. And it was just really helpful for giving us a good framework for we want to be part of the local church and what is church membership actually like biblically, and how we're supposed to submit to our church in so many different ways, like financially, relationally, like with the location that we live in. Like it affects all of these decisions, what jobs you get. And so I think even just walking into like, okay, we're coming out of our college ministry, out of the church we were part of in college, into a church plant in a new city. How can we really like orient our lives around the church, and what does scripture say about it? So, yeah.
That's so good. We have loved this conversation. We hope it encourages you to invest in those seniors and maybe send this episode to people who are about to graduate or trying to navigate what to do after college. We will put all these recommendations in the show notes, as well as a link to GenSend Summer. And so you guys have heard the impact that it's had on Everett and Olivia and even their post-grad plans. And so make sure you guys check that out. Look at the locations, maybe even recommend it to some people, a junior or sophomore who's still maybe navigating what they want to do later on. That's a great step for them as they try to figure out where they want to live, what does being part of a local church plant look like, and being a part of what God is doing there. So thank you guys so much for coming on. Again, we'll put everything in the show notes. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.